that. All right. Check my audio real quick. We should be getting good. Sick. All right. So, welcome to the last week for vehicle design. So, a couple different things before we get started. We do have the next topic for October, right? So, they took a vote on it. The Livestream Plus members took a vote. And we're going with effective studying for fantasy illustration, right? So fantasy illustration was one of the topics that we could have voted on. Effective studying won, but fantasy illustrations got pretty close. So we're going to kind of combine the two and hopefully come up with something cool. It's mostly going to be about, just how do we like actually study, right? Because there's so many different various things that that we're like told to do, right? Like still lifes, plein airs, form language breakdowns, and all sorts of stuff from sketching, life drawing, whatever, right? There's so many different things you can do, but how do we actually apply it, right? Because so many times, I'll do like a study, a film study. I'm like, wow, that was really cool, but like, what do I do with that? What's the point of all of this? You know what I'm saying? So that's what October is going to be about. It is starting a bit early. So, we have an extra week in September, right? And I'm going to be missing a week in October because I'm going to be at Lightbox, so I can't stream that week. So we're going to kind of like make up for that with this extra week in September, essentially. So next week, we're going to be starting the effective studying kind of course, I guess, section. And that's going to be on September 25th. So, we'll go from there. I'll kind of like, I'll kind of like break down how I want to do this next week. Just like, what I'm going to have. I'm going to show you kind of like how I would go about this, when and where. Like usually what I like to do is I try to equate this to a scenario during a work session, right? Where it's like, hey, I was given a task and I actually need to do a study, which happens pretty often. So just as a heads up, right? This is what's coming down the pipeline. We still have one more week. We still have this week for the vehicle designs, and we'll get into that now. So let's get to it. Let's see. Boom. All right. So I have a car here, right? Cars be carring. So last week, right, what we did was we kind of got that base model. We got it up to we started painting and designing and actually like doing stuff to it, right? To actually add materials, add details, various things like that, right? Right now, it's kind of like how far I basically pushed all of that. There's obviously a lot more that I still want to do. There's some things that I want to cover today to kind of push this even further. But this is like the base version of kind of what it's going to end up being like. Because when we did the gray block out, do I have that? No, I think I deleted it. Not deleted it, I put it in my asset folder. I had the gray block out from 3D. I painted it on top and I got kind of like the forms looking okay, right? Where, they're more in line with what I want. Just remember, right, for everybody, as you're modeling, right, unless you're just that good at modeling, right, which if you're watching this, you're probably not. I don't say it like that, but you know what I mean? Like, you're not watching this if you're that good, right? So, the idea is if you're not amazing at modeling, right, me included, just do the best you can, right, render out, and then paint over on top, right? And that's really, for everybody, like how I like to approach things as I like work, right? Because there's a point to where I didn't really know 3D, and some would say I still don't know 3D, but when I was starting to learn for the first time, I had to open the file and just start kind of messing around making stuff. There's a lot of things that I just couldn't do, right? I was just unable to model certain forms. I was unable to kind of like do the things that I was thinking. And so, I could like spend all day looking up tutorials, hopefully finding that one little nugget of information that could kind of get me there, right? But at the end of the day, you really don't have time when you're working like that, right? Like you only have 3 days to get the whole thing done. It's gonna take me 3 days to even find whatever tool I need to even finish the thing, right? And so when you run into those gaps, just remember you can just render out and then just finish the painting, right? And that's what I was doing for a long time. I was like unable to really model things, and even to this day, there's things that I just can't model, right? I just don't know how. I'm just not versed enough in it, and so I'll just render out the views that I need, make the adjustments in Photoshop, and as I go further and further, I'll pick up like 1 or 2 skills here and there, right? Just to help me out, where it's like, oh, this is how you manipulate, things. This is how you mirror objects. This is how you do loop cuts and whatever other tool that you want to kind of run into. And every single object kind of comes with its own challenges, right? And slowly after a couple of years, you kind of start developing the skill to just kind of use it to whatever you need, right? And that's what I highly recommend for everybody doing this. Just know that whatever model that you make, right, you can always paint on top. You're never stuck with whatever design that you came up with in 3D, right? You can always change it. Just like kind of pulling up this this model again. Where is it at? Is it this one? No. Original? Wait. No, it's not that one. Sorry, my file is kind of messed up right now. I just it got kind of overwhelming. Not overwhelming, but it just got kind of out of hand, and I was like, I don't want to see this anymore. And I just grabbed it all and threw it in a folder. Just labeled it assets. I think it's this one. Let's see. Something like that, right? Excuse the blocks. That's what I used for my perspective grid. But just something like this, it doesn't look good, right? And the thing is, when you see this, all you have to look at, or all you have to understand about this, is that there's potential. There's okay, I can fix that, right? And that's really where our design skills come into play, right? If you don't have design skills, none of this is going to go well for you, right? Just work on your design, work on your understanding of forms, and understand whatever topic it is that you need to design. And eventually, you paint it down and you do what you need to do, using 3D as an asset to kind of help you. But it doesn't necessarily carry you the whole way, right? Because it never will, right? If your design looks bad in 3, or if you have a bad design, it doesn't matter if it's in 3D or 2D, right? So from there, right, painting that grayscale base, bringing in the different materials we have, right? The reason why we started gray is because we would duplicate the layer, colorize it, and then kind of mask it in and out where we want it, right? And that's kind of where we're at now. We're at this good kind of midpoint, because there's a lot of detail work that needs to be done that not that I can't do it with that process. It's just not necessary. So at this point, everything's kind of flattened out. It's not flat, but this whole car is on one layer. Let me turn off that one. There you go. That whole section is in one grouping. You know what I mean? There's some small details here and there that are separate, but overall, right, it's pretty separate. Or pretty flat down to those pieces, and then I'm gonna kind of start painting on top and giving all the different effects and stuff that I want to go for right now, right? So hopefully that makes sense. This is I'm gonna kind of start pushing this further from here, and then we'll go from there, right? So the first thing before we start any of that, right, what I want to really hit home is that right now I haven't really visually, I have not put any thought into what the background could be, right? Because when you look at this, it's just the vehicle, and then it's gray, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just nothing right about that either, right? And something that you really want to do when, I guess, trying to present your vehicles, right? You want to show it in context, or show it in a way that I guess excites the audience, right? Whether that's your leads, whether that's your client, whether that's, people online or whatever, whoever's looking at your image, you want to create something that excites the audience. And when you just leave it as a gray background, it just kind of is whatever, you know what I mean? It's not really that good. It doesn't really grab that much attention, right? But what I did was I just made up a background. And there's a couple ways you can do it, right? The first way is what I I guess would normally do, right? I didn't do that this time, but I'll just explain it for everybody, right? What I would normally do is just take this vehicle and put it in context with like whatever it's at, right? If it's driving on the road, put it on the road, right? If it's driving in the city, put it in the city. Just kind of indicate things. You don't really have to spend that long actually designing things out, but you do need to make sure that we understand kind of where we would see this car, because when you see the thing, you want to see where it's at as well. That's part of the vehicle, right? Even though it's not physically part of it, that's how we'll see it in the game/movie. So we need to see it in context with the things that it's going to be around, right? So when you present things, you want to show that. Or you want to present it in a way that just kind of makes sense and looks a little bit exciting, or it has something to it that kind of like pops, right? You're trying to create either a nice selling point, right? A visual push that makes it look interesting, or a way to kind of show context. In this case, I usually always show context in all my paintings, right? That's what we've been doing for the past however long, right? Like the dune buggy one was an example of that, where it's like it's in the environment it was meant to be in, right? I decided to go a different direction this time. And so what I did was this. Boom, right? I just made a visual graphic that kind of like made sense for this product because, let's see, hold up. Sorry, my cat just like bombed the litter box next to me, so I'm like, not like dying, but I do be suffocating over here. Let's see, hold up. So, one of the K-Truck advertisements that I saw for one of the references that I had, it had a very particular look to it, right? And a lot of vehicle actually advertising is like this, right? Where it had, this is an actual thing, and it's just like in this kind of red void of environment. I was like, that's kind of cool, and I like the way it looks, and I liked some of the older like just I guess vehicle advertisements, whether it was like a painting or okay, buddy, sorry. My cats are going crazy right now. Anyway, just kind of like showing it the way that you would maybe see it in a magazine or something like that, right? And that's kind of what I'm going for here. And the reason I want to do that for this is because it makes sense for the topic, right? Don't just do this because it's something that, oh yeah, I want a colored background too. It's like, no, do it because it makes sense for the thing that you're painting. Don't just do something random, right? So when it comes down to whatever vehicle that you're doing, right, what do you want to show about it? Is there a flavor? Is there an idea that you really like? Is there something that we can reference in real life that really kind of shows that personality, right? And this kind of helps finish off that package. Is it the best design I've ever seen? I don't know, right? I find it kind of cool. And then we're still going to work on it. We're still going to push it from here. But that's the kind of idea, right? It's grounded in something that exists and makes sense. And so that's, why we're doing it this way. Because, I always show things in context. You have an example of me already doing that. This is another way that I would probably do something, right? Just something simple, just the word K-Truck in the back, some symbols that I already put on the side of the car, some like, fake logo thing, and then, there you go. And maybe like on the left side or the right side here, bottom right, there'd be like, oops, some like text or something. I don't know. We'll figure that out later. But for now, it's kind of a good start. And the reason I want to start this now is because I'm trying to now start combining everything down, painting everything up, getting the illustration quality up a little bit higher, but also compositing, right? Because I kind of painted this in the room of like a gray room, right? Like the lighting and everything's kind of set up to be that way. And so now I don't have like the reflective lights of the blues and like the reflections and stuff like that kind of happening in the car. So there is a separation between the objects, which I kind of don't really want, So that's what we're going to be fixing today, right? Okay. So that's the first thing, right? Put a background on the thing that you're doing. Usually I do recommend doing this first, but this is vehicle design. We are kind of pinpointing what we're supposed to be doing for vehicles. So I kind of wanted to focus on that first, and then now it's like the extra, let's add some stuff to make this cooler, right? I swear my cat was like quiet right before this happened, so. All right, cool. Let's get started. So the first thing I want to do, right? I want to kind of start talking about some weathering and things, right? So I'm going to we're just kind of running at this point, but there's a thing that I want to do, and it's based off of the last week's assignment, just a little bit different, right? It's the next step of that, and so there's weathering effects, right? These vehicles, you can show it brand new and it wouldn't be that weird. Like, for example, like, you know, the K-Truck idea here, that's a brand new car. At the very least, it's clean. So, you know, it's fine to show things that way in this very specific instance, right? Where it's like, it's a vehicle, it's an advertisement, you're trying to show the thing. I don't really like doing that so much. So I'm going to kind of show you what I would do just to make things feel a little bit more interesting, a little more used, a little more character to it, right? So this is where we want to think about the story of your vehicle. What does it do? Who owns it? What's happening here, right? Because you have this, you know, machine that is operated by somebody with a personality, with somebody with a story, somebody with a use for it, right? This is clearly not farm equipment, right? So, you know, what is it? What are we doing with it, right? So I'm gonna grab my K-Truck. Is it right here? Yeah. I'm gonna merge these textures down because I don't really need them separate anymore. Boom. And if I need them separate, too bad. This is where we learn how to paint. All right, so I'm gonna duplicate this up, right? So now I have another copy of it. And what I like to do, right, is think about, like, you know, some of the scratches, some of the dirt, some various things, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is, like, let's say like paint was kind of chipping, right? So I'm going to take this whole vehicle, duplicate it up. I'm going to desaturate it. And then I'm going to kind of lighten it up a little bit. It's kind of like the idea thinking is that there's like raw metal underneath, right? Or maybe not raw, but, you know, it's like a painted metal. So if you scratch it or chip it, right, there's like a gray metal underneath. And so I'm going to mask that out completely. And then I'm going to use like some sort of brush to kind of give me those scratches, right? So right now it feels like brand new. It feels, you know, it's just like nice and clean and everything's like perfect, right? Which we don't really necessarily want. And so what I'm going to do is find the spots that things would hit, right? And what that means is whenever I'm like driving, right? Cars have a directionality to it, right? There's, you know, things are always going to be hitting it this way, right? Because the cars always go that way, generally speaking, right? Most of the time, 99% of the time, they're always driving straight because that's how we're oriented in the car, right? And so when things are always coming this way, right, you're always trying to find spots that would get hit. Scratches down here don't really make that much sense, not unless it's a point that people actually interact with, right? But points on top of here, on top of there, right? Because things that would lay in the bed might kind of lay across and you might get scratches like that. You know, spots in front, like on these kind of front leading edges, would get a lot of like scratches and dings on it, right? There might be a lot of stuff here, right? A lot of stuff down here. Especially like even stuff like here going this way, right? Like if you look at the wheel kind of kicking rocks up, look at your car, right? If you have a car, look at a car. What is happening? What is he? Hey buddy, you okay? He's not okay. He's got his nice scratcher and he's like freaking out. Anyway, so just look at other cars in real life and be like, hey, what's going on here? What do they do, right? And especially a car that's kind of operating in the same, I guess, type of thing that your vehicle does, right? I wouldn't look at farm equipment so much to like to design my design the scratches and the things off of this car, because it's not the same type of car, right? I would look at more faster cars or cars like that, right? Because that's the intention here. And so if you have a ship, right, look at like planes and see what those scratch marks look like. If you look at, you know, boats even, right? Like, you know, even though it's not the same medium, right, there's a similar idea there, right? And so whenever you're designing these scratches, think about that story, think about that function, right? All right, let's see. So with that in mind, let's get to it. So what I like to do is this. I have my layer pretty separate, right? It's just like this lighter thing. And then now we'll just kind of start painting it out, right? Now it's like grab a chalky brush, something that looks like scratches, right? And just start adding them where you think they're gonna go, right? And that's really it, to be honest. It's like a lot of that. And it's like a lot of different versions of that, right? Where, you know, every corner is gonna kind of get, you know, so not every corner, but like there's gonna be little like scratches and dings and all sorts of like fun stuff just to kind of add character, because you never really want something that just feels like sterile. You know what I mean? Like it needs to feel like it does something, and you can kind of mask in and out some of these things just to kind of get those scratches a little bit better. Especially like panels like this right here, right, where you get a lot of these kind of leading edges. Like you don't want to, you really wouldn't do that on the back so much because everything's hitting this side, right? Cool, cool, cool. So it's just like doing that and kind of working through your entire painting. And the reason I do this now versus earlier, because I need this flat. I need this, I need the different materials to kind of all be, I guess, combined for me to do this effectively, right? Because there's going to be, you know, differences in some of the paint going from, you know, one paint to the other, right? And then, you know, we can paint that down later, but it makes it a little bit easier. I like to have this as a different step because it's important that, you know, a lot of this stuff be done in like separate phases, right? We don't want to spend too much time like, you know, figuring out all these weathering effects and then be like, oh yeah, the design's just not working out for us, right? Cool. A lot of stuff like down here too, bro. So this is going to take a while, but I just kind of want to show you what I'm thinking as I do it. The next thing I'm going to do, right, is I need some like 3D effect for this, right? I need something to make it feel like it pops, because right now there could be the feeling that it's like paint on top, right? It's like, you know, it's like paint on top of the red paint, right? It's like gray paint on top of red paint, right? So what I'm going to do is I have my mask, and this is the reason we do it this way. I'm going to command control click, you know, that mask, and it's going to give me the edge of everything that I just painted. Every pixel that's on there, it's going to give me an edge. I'm going to go underneath this layer, make a new layer, and I'm going to stroke that. So you can go to edit and then stroke, right? I mapped it to command F because I didn't need find for anything, so that's how I do it, but you do it however you want. It's not mapped by default, right? And you click OK. And now we get this kind of like fake outline on top of everything. And you can just move it down 1 pixel or up 1 pixel, right? And that gives you that sense of like, oh, there's like thickness to that paint. And maybe that could be a little too thick, right? It just depends on kind of how you feel about that. But now you're kind of creating that illusion that there's, you know, something going on. There's like things kind of wearing off, right? And then from here, it's rinse and repeat, right? I would do this over and over again with different materials, right? You can do rust, you can do, you know, mud, all sorts of things, right? Like if I were to do something like mud, do the same thing, except instead of like desaturating, right? Just turn it to like an orangey kind of color, right? Turn down that brightness. Nope, not the saturation. Something like that. It's chocolate car. Boom. Get like a splatter brush, right? Where is this at? Is that? Yeah, that's kind of cool. So, something you want to pay attention to. This splatter brush that I'm using right now, it's very like as if it's splattered forward, right? Like you don't really want that. So be careful of that, right? Just understand that there is a dynamic to the splatter. So what I like doing is this. I'll kind of put it down almost seemingly in a random spot, but un unlink that layer, I'll grab that mask and transform it, because now I need that directionality, right? I need that like spray. So I'm gonna kind of scale that down, grab this corner and drag it out, right? And it feels like it's more, just like directional. You see how that looks like it's like spraying, right? And then you just gotta go scale that down and you put it where it needs to go. And then like something like that, right? Kind of, you ballpark it, right? It gets you kind of close. And then, that's, we go from there. I can like level this out to kind of get it darker or lighter. Like if it's like too much or not enough. I need this more opaque is why I wanted that. There you go. Cool. And we're just adding like some interest, intrigue, things to make this feel like it's done stuff, right? It's not such a bland kind of, make sure you relink that after you're done with it. It's not such a bland kind of thing. There's things that happen to it, right? And just through that alone, you just get character. You know what I mean? You just get like intrigue, you get story, and it helps sell it. A lot of these things, like when you see a truck, it's like it's fine, but then you see, or like a Jeep or something, but you see it covered in mud or something, you're just like, oh shit, that thing's been out. That thing gets around. And so from there, it's just like continuing these ideas. You're detailing small things, you're adding cut lines, you're adding whatever details you need, and then we're just going to finalize it, right? So that's the kind of bulk of what I'm going to be doing today. Obviously, I'm not done yet. We're going to keep going, but it's a lot of like just rinse and repeat until we hopefully get to something kind of cool. So with that in mind, right, we're just going to start running now. So cool. Let's get to it. Let's see. Let me check my chats and everything. Yo, Kevin Jick's watching. What's up, dude? It's been a second. I don't know about that. I don't know about this master business you're talking about, dude. I need to take lessons from you, dog. So, a lot of that, right? A lot of just rinse and repeat. We're gonna start making logos, right? I think right now it's missing just like character, right? When you look at things, cars and stuff, right? Let's see, car livery. And like constantly be looking up like references of things, because like at this point, something that happens a lot, right, that I find with a lot of designers is that when you get something super unique, or I'm not saying this is the most unique thing in the world, but when you get a design that is like kind of not seen before and you're kind of like form languaging the hell out of it, right? What you need to do is dial it back with something else, right? Because if you start doing like a crazy design and then, crazy other things, everything's just all crazy. And when it's all crazy, nothing's crazy, right? It's like when everything's weird, there's nothing to compare the weirdness off of it, right? Right? There's nothing to ground this back. And so for me, one of the bigger things I like doing is once I have my form language design down, right? Start bringing in references of actual things. You know what I mean? Start bringing references of like, normal things, because it's the normal things that give us context for the unique thing, right? It looks unique because it's in a world of normal. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, depending on what that world is, but look at most designs, right? Some of the most iconic designs, they're iconic because of the world that they're in, right? It's like, some designs really wouldn't be that special in other universes, but because it looks a certain way, in comparison to its surroundings, right? Comparison to the other things on it, right? You want to make sure that, you're creating that comparison and you're grounding the audience back into what is understood, right? If they've never seen this before, they really won't like get it. They'll look at it and be like, oh, that's whatever. Cool, man. But when they see something that they recognize, like, oh, I know that. And then you're like, oh, boom, right? Same reason why we add windows onto spaceships and shit, right? Like, you don't really need windows, right? You can just have cameras for everything. But we need the windows for when you see it on the outside, you can tell how big the fucking thing is. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things that don't necessarily make sense when you logically think about it, but it makes sense when you think about it in the context of an audience viewing this thing, not just the world itself. You know what I'm saying? because yes, this is built for the world that we kind of established in last month's live stream, right? In that kind of sci-fi world. But, you know, the idea is people will experience this thing, whether it's a movie or a game, and you have to design for that idea. It's for an audience member that's playing a game, not just the fact that it's in the game. You know what I mean? Not just the fact that it's in that world. And so looking at actual liveries and stuff, like looking at what they have, right? Look at real ones. There's some designs and that's fine, right? But look at like, here, let's see. Let me take this off screen real quick. Boom. Also, Hoonigan liveries always look so cool. They always look so unique. There's always like, it's always like really pushing that boundary of like what patterns you would even think about using. Like seeing like, you know, just the smaller, like obviously there's the big logos, right? You know, clearly the understanding that there is one sponsor that pays more, and then there's their brand, right? And then there's like all the small stuff, and that's what we're looking for. Like where do you see it, right? There's like stuff like that, and then you just like start kind of looking at it and seeing how they do things. You know, these are cool. Sick. All right, cool. So we need to start making some logos. I need to do something. What I would recommend though, try not to like use logos from actual things. It gets kind of weird. I mean, for like our stuff, who cares? You know what I mean? Like it's not really that big a deal. But when it gets into like client stuff, that's when you're like, yeah, you really want to make sure. It's funny because I had a Honda logo on this. I was like, because I was referencing that Honda K truck, and I was like, you know, making sure. I was kind of like staying a little closer, and then I was like, you know what? I don't think I should do that, right? Because it could be, you know, it could be a little bit weird sometimes. It is something that you might want to try and avoid. You know what I mean? Just saying. But yeah, that's how I go about that. So let's see if there's any questions. At this point in time, we're kind of like in this demo phase. So if there's any questions you guys have, I do have some things I want to talk about, just in general, but I'll let you guys talk first if there's anything that you guys want to bring up. Let's see. Boom. Where's my... Helvetica font. That's the only way. So what I like doing, I like creating like alternate versions of things. Like for example, Yokohama is a actual tire brand, right? That's not Yokohama, right? You know what I'm saying? And then like just like fake numbers and stuff, just to kind of give us like an identification, right? Just something that's like, oh, that's kind of cool, you know, stuff like that. That's what we're aiming for, right? Let's see, like Toyo tires, right? Hold on, let me see what that logo looks like. Toyo tires. One of the things that I wanted to talk about this week, right? And it's the reason I want to talk about it is because it's come up a couple times. Toyo tires. There you go. The reason I want to talk about this week is because it's actually come up a couple times, and I've actually seen it happen various times throughout the stream, right? Especially with people that are doing the assignments. So whenever, especially for classes, I feel like classes, it's a really big deal. There's always this tendency to like really kind of like push the bar. You know what I mean? Where it's like, I'm not trying to discourage anybody from like trying hard. That's not what I'm trying to do. But there is, there's this push. Oh, pro tip. If you ever want to like make a logo different, just change the kerning on it. I'll say like that. We're like, oh wow, that's a weird logo. It's like it's just squished together, man. But anyway, the reason I want to bring this up is because there's a dynamic that happens in a professional setting that I guess there's something that happens in a student setting that you cannot do in a professional setting, right? It's not like bad. I mean, it's bad when you do it in a professional setting, but it's something where it's like you wouldn't think this would be an issue, right? When it comes to just working as a whole, right? And the biggest thing that I see happen a lot is this like push for like, I guess, over drawing or over explaining things in the wrong phase, right? And so what does that mean? So there's times where like I'll be doing ideations, for example. I'll do like side views, and then I'll just kind of like, I'll just be creating ideation sketches and whatever, right? And then I'll be like, oh yeah, so like this truck, it kind of does this. So I'll just do a quick sketch, a drawing of like this whole mechanism coming off, or this whole thing changing, doing whatever, right? Like you're really trying to explain it out. And in a student setting, right, generally speaking, it's not wrong, it's just a waste of time, right? Because it depends on when you do it, right? Because this happens a lot. There's times where it's like, hey, like you come back 7 days later in a student setting, right? Like in a student setting, it's a week later, right? So 7 days. So, the tendency is to just kind of keep drawing. You're making all these like, I like this design. And then I kind of like, did all these turnarounds for it. I did all these things. And it's like fucking sick. You know what I mean? It looks good. But in a professional setting, right, you really want to avoid that. And it sounds crazy because it's like, why would you not want to draw as much? Why would you not want to design as much, right? The reason I say that is because there's one other thing that's introduced in a professional setting that you'll never see in a student setting, right? And that's the idea of an approval process. So whenever we are working in a, in a professional setting, right, there's always somebody that approves your design, right? Like, because you do a design and someone says, yeah, great, move forward, right? And so that process really, and you wouldn't think it's that big a deal, but it's fucking everything, dude. I promise you, it changes the way I work. Like everything about what I do changes because of that process, right? Just the idea of approval, the way I paint, right? The reason why there's so many damn layers, the reason why I kind of work the way I do is because of that one idea. The fact that there's a client approving this. Because if you did a design, right, and you're like, let's go fucking ham on this design. Like we're in first round ideation. I got a packet of references, and then they haven't seen any art yet, right? So there's that. I need to, and I want to go ham on it. I'm just like, dude, I'm gonna fucking blow them out of the water, right? And then I, kind of go overboard. I do my ideations, and I do some of those variations, and I kind of like, show the functions of others. You know what I mean? And then I send it in, and they're like, oh, we don't really like that design. You know what I mean? It's like, shit. Because now it took you, I don't know, 2 days, right? 2 days in a professional setting is a fucking eternity. But like, imagine like 2 weeks, right? You spent 2 weeks in a class setting, just designing something, going all in. I designed the cockpit, I designed the undercarriage, designed the trunk, designed all that, right? And then they're like, oh, we don't even want the truck. We're gonna go with a car instead. Like, fuck, what do I do? It's like there's so much time wasted. And in a student setting, not really that big a deal, right? Like, because generally speaking, even my feedback, for example, I'll just fix whatever you have. Whatever you brought is what I'll give you feedback on, right? But in a professional setting, they're actually very particular about things. Like, they're like, oh yeah, we were actually talking in a story meeting the other day that VizDev's not involved in, right? That happens all the time, where it's like, because as a VizDev artist or even as a concept artist, you're not involved in every meeting. So you don't get every note right off the bat. And so like, they're like, oh yeah, we scrapped that truck last week. We just forgot to tell you, because they're busy as hell too. And it's like nobody's fault. I mean, clearly it'd be nice if someone told us, but happens, right? And so you kind of waste all that time designing something and diving deeper into something that really just gets canceled, right? And that's why whenever I'm kind of like doing this process, especially some of the stuff that I was doing in previous weeks, where it's like we're just doing side views, and then we're not really kind of moving into modeling. I'm not trying to do ideas in 3D. Hey buddy, you okay, dude? Hey, come here. Sorry, he's being needy. Why is he so needy right now? Anyway, the reason why I won't like model something, like model out a bunch of different ideas, and I don't really do like 50 thumbnails anymore, right? Because like when we were in school, right, it was like, yeah, do like 100 thumbnails of a painting, and then like we'll pick one and go with it. And it's like they always pick like one of the first 10 that you did. You know what I'm saying? It's never like, wow, the 99th one, that was it. You know what I mean? Like that's never the case. And so whenever I'm working, I'm always like, if I don't get this in 6 designs, right? I have no idea what I'm doing, right? It's like I'm not gonna get this. It's not gonna be okay, right? And so whenever you're working, right, it's trying to find that balance of like, what is like, I guess, what's needed, right? What's enough ideas, but what's not time wasting, right? Because if you did 50 thumbnails and you nailed it in 5, right? Well, you did 45 thumbnails that were unnecessary. You know what I mean? So it's like highly inefficient, right? You could have spent, I don't know, how long did it take you to do 50 thumbnails, right? If I did 5 thumbnails, if I can do like 5 paintings in a day, right? That's fucking 9 days, right? Yeah, 9, 5, 45. Yeah, that's 9 days, right? Which is way too long, first and foremost. And it's a waste of time, right? Even if you did them fast, even if you could do it in 3 or 4 days, you could have just saved those 2-3 days, right? So that's kind of where like it really becomes important to understand, like, what are we even doing, right? What's the point of this step, and only doing what is necessary for it? Because if it's not approved, right, then you don't even know if it's gonna stay, and it's not even like, and it might not even be about like the idea that the concept is good or not, right? Because something being approved versus something not being approved is not always about how good that design is, right? It's, there's other factors, like, oh, maybe they just cut it because for budget reasons or it's too complicated, or they need a simpler idea, whatever it is, right? It happens all the time. And so you really want to make sure that you're kind of working and understanding those ideas. As a student, it doesn't really matter. Your stuff doesn't go through an approval process, so you'll never really have to experience that in a class setting. But it creates bad habits, right? It creates a kind of process that really doesn't translate to a work setting, right? Same reason why whenever I tell people, like, especially with form language exercise stuff, I make you like stay with your form language, because in a student setting, if you're tired of it, just give up, right? You just change the reference, right? You're just like, cool, I don't really like where this is going. I'm going to change some references and hopefully get something in a good direction, right? In a work setting, they gave you that reference. They told you, hey, I want this. And so what do? You have to keep it that way, because that's what the client asked for. You know what I mean? And it's really, really hard to kind of do that, right? Because before, I remember when I was in school, it was a lot of like just shooting at the hip. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds funny, but it's a lot of like just praying that a design kind of works out okay. You know what I mean? It's just, you're just like constantly just doing designs and hopefully something sticks, right? And if the design changed midway, fuck it. You know what I mean? It is what it is. But when you get to the work setting, you really can't do that anymore, because it doesn't allow you to actually work like a professional. You know what I'm saying? There was and on the flip side of this, right? That's talking about ideation. There's also the finishing aspect of it too. I had my art director one time was telling me, she was like, okay, so when you're doing your painting, right, make sure you have like solid steps when it comes to your actual painting. That's why, like, when we talk about for like the stream and stuff, there's like very solid steps. This is pulled from that, right? I know exactly where a thumbnail kind of stops. I know exactly where a finish should go, right? There's like the highest level of finish I can take it. Not that it's like the highest that there ever is, but I kind of know what's generally expected, right? Anything else is like pretty extra, right? And so we were talking, and I was doing this thumbnail, right? And I was like, dude, I'm really feeling this painting. You know, I was like, it's working out, right? Like for once in my early career, I was like, dude, it's go time, baby. You know what I mean? Like, it's because it's, you know, you're excited because generally speaking, we're not that good. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of, sorry. There it is. You know, we're excited because our paintings just don't go well. You know, at least mine didn't for the first little bit, right? You know, like, I mean, hopefully, maybe I'm just dumb. Maybe I just suck. But there's a lot of that where everything just doesn't look good for a very long time. And so when I was doing my paintings, I was getting excited because I was like, dude, it's looking sick, man. Like, and even some of my coworkers were like, dude, that's amazing, you know? And then I show it to my art director, and she goes, oh, that's, you know, it looks really good, but that's really bad for us now. And I was like, why? You know, like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I did the thing, you know, I'm quote unquote killing it, right? And she's like, so we're in like the kind of medium phase right now. We're just trying to bring it up to like a 70% quality so we can get approval on the concept before we render, right? And then she goes, so when they tell us to finish it, what are you gonna do? You know? I was like, this is it. It's like, yeah, it might look good, but the client is like, you know, the client is like, oh, they're in the thumbnail phase right now. They're in the rough phase. They're in the blockout phase. So when they say, wow, that looks amazing, finish it off. You know, what do you do about that, right? And that is like, it happens so often where, you know, because like you ever get this thing where the teachers like you know, when you're in a class and then they're like, hey, yeah, that painting looks sick, finish it off, right? And then you're like, yeah, I'll do that. And then in your mind you're like, it was finished. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sure I've done that to like so many students before too, but the idea is that happens on the opposite end too. It's like, oh, finish it off, because they don't know what's done. Like they might have seen some of your work and they're like, wow, that's amazing, you know, and it could have just been like, you know, like whatever, right? But they're under the impression that you're kind of in a blockout phase right now. So it's really hard to like, I guess, backpedal that. Be like, oh no, it is done. You know, that is it. Or worst case scenario, you know, they don't think you're done, and then, you know, it's like yeah, finish it off. You're like, ah, shit. You know what I mean? Like, I have to take this painting marginally further, because the issue is this, right? When you're working with clients, it's not just enough to do the work. You have to set it up as well, right? Like, for example, if I make this graph right here, right? We have 3 phases. We have ideation phase. We have like kind of block out / like, you know, it's, you know, the idea is kind of ready, and then, you know, you're texturing things out or doing whatever, and then finalization, right? And then, you know, first step, actually, hold up, I should do 4 blocks right here. Hold up, let me redo this. Boom, 2, 3, 4. Like start, ideation, block out, final, right? So if you start and then ideation, you go like bam, you know what I mean? You're like, dude, here's like 50 thumbnails, bro. You know what I mean? They're like, oh shit, this guy's insane. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's sick. That's a ton of work, and really fast. Every idea is good. Everything looks good, right? And that's great. That's beautiful to be in, right? But what happens is now, this phase, the ideal trajectory is up here. You know what I mean? Like, because this is how you started, and this is what they're expecting, right? It's not like they're not expecting more but they don't expect less. That's the thing. They don't expect less. And so when you show that block out, you have to fucking knock it out of the park, right? Or you have to show the next thing. It's like, how do you increase the idea? And that could be quality, that could be idea, that could be whatever, right? That could be a lot of different things. But it's like, it's the expectation, because you could still kill it. But if you don't meet that expectation, it's always like, oh, okay, he's kind of petering off, right? And then, right, you're going from, here to like, let's say you just got here, which is fine, right? And then finish, right? You're like, wow, yeah, this is just a block out. We're kind of almost there, right? They're like, cool, finish it off. Well, they're expecting still up here, or from the original thing up here, right? But in reality, all you can really do is here. And that trajectory kind of like peters off. You kind of end with lower energy. And with a client, it's not the end of the world, right? It's not the worst thing that could happen, but it is something that does happen. You know what I mean? It's something that with a client, they're going to expect a certain level of performance. And if you end on a certain performance, it's not like terrible, especially if you kind of nailed all the, all the marks, but it's kind of underwhelming, right? And then when they remember back, they're like, oh yeah, he was okay. He wasn't bad, right? But if you do it the reverse way, right? You kind of like work into like a really high finish, right? Or you work like kind of gradual and work in the beginning. Oopsies, don't create a new server. When you're making like that trajectory, right? The same idea, when you have 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And you're trying to, finish. You don't want to shoot low and then impress them later, right? Because that's bad. Because for, half the assignment, 75% of the assignment, or 33% of the assignment, or 66, sorry. They were like very underwhelmed, right? They were kind of down here. They're like, well, he's okay, They could actually cancel you right here. They'd be like, you know what? We're going to go with somebody else. I think, the other freelancer or something is kind of more suited to us, or whatever it is, right? And it's like trying to it's setting up that expectation. And it's something that you don't really think about as a student. We're like, why would you, right? Because that doesn't make any sense, right? Because there's no real reason to worry about freelancing when you're just learning how to do art. But it is things that happen. And that's where like a lot of those, like I was saying earlier, creating that expectation, right? Or kind of doing that extra work and not having that kind of like that, I guess, you're either like you're kind of doing that extra work and wasting time without approval, or you're kind of setting up expectations and stuff like that, right? That client idea really changes everything, and you have to be prepared for it. You have to understand like how that works, because the first like couple clients you work with, it's gonna be like, I think for me, whenever I first started doing freelance, it was a pain. It was a pain in the ass, because it's like, it's not just painting. And then you realize that. You're like, ah, shit. It's like, there's so much that you have to actually like kind of plan out, not just the fact that art itself is fucking hard. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, there's things to learn, right? Just kind of realize like whenever I'm talking about things, especially like in this setting, right? These processes that I developed, right? I mean, it's not my process 100%, but they are things that I kind of like had to kind of work through, right? Like they're not made up, you know what I'm saying? Like I guess somebody made them up, but I don't just do it because or like whenever we're creating and stuff, I don't just do that because I like messing with people, you know what I mean? It really is about like trying to get a process that's like indestructible, right? Knowing when and where to do things. That's, I think for me, one of the bigger things to learn when you're kind of starting off, right? When you're a student, whatever gets a good design in is all I care about, right? Because that's what we need. We need a good design first and foremost. You know what I mean? But when you're a professional, that's when it's like you got to change gears. It's that wasted effort. For one, worst case scenario can end up with you getting fired, right? Because you're just not producing fast enough, wasting time or whatever it is, right? Even though your intention was very good, right? You intended on creating a beautiful design that, you know, hopefully they would appreciate. But, you know, it just ends up being, I guess, wasted effort, essentially. You know what I'm saying? And then, like, best case scenario, you wasted time on your end when you could be hanging out with your cat or hanging out with your significant other or whoever. You know what I'm saying? So, things like that. Boom. Right now, I have this. So when like I was saying earlier, I was painting this vehicle in that gray void. So the lighting kind of was that gray void lighting, right? But now I have this kind of like graphic happening. The surrounding is, you know, a little bluer. I don't want to turn the whole thing blue. You know, it is going to be a bit of like faking that compositing. And that's the cool thing about, I guess, working mostly in 2D that I find is that if I work in 3D, and like, especially if I have like, if I put it in a box where, you know, it's just like, you know, a straight on color, you know, that cycles pass is going to bounce that color everywhere. And then everything can kind of be a little too whatever, right? But when you're doing something kind of stylized, something kind of like, you know, something very like not realistic in this sense, right? You kind of get a little more freedom doing it this way. You know what I mean? Yo, what's up, David? How's it going, dude? You just said yo in the chat. I was like, didn't know how to respond to that, man. You gotta give me more than that. What's layer is that? Oh, yeah, I don't need that right now. I'll come back to that. So the question is, so with clients, just under promise and over deliver. It's hard to say, you know. Maybe. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to say because every client's a little bit different, right? It's a balance, because things that work with some clients don't work with other clients, right? That's just how it is, because, you know, every client's their unique snowflake, you know. But that, yeah, there's a balance that you need to strike with the clients that you're working with, because, you know, you never really know what they're responding to or what they really like, or because, you know, they'll do meetings that you're not even a part of, right? Just because that's how it works. You're not always in their studio, right? And so there is, yes, you know, don't under deliver. I guess that's the main thing. You know, do what's like necessary, right? To kind of whatever's agreed upon, right? But this is mostly for, it's less about the client and more about for your like just sanity, right? Like, I think something that happens a lot is there is this I don't know, thing where we kind of, I do this often, and I'm not saying this because I'm like better than you and I've never run, it's like, no, I run into this problem fucking monthly, man. Like, it's not even like, I'm not saying this because I'm like, because I know better. It's because I do it, you know. I say this because, you know, it's I've made this mistake so often, right? Where you kind of like, you know, you I don't say overpromise, but you know, there's, I guess, like the setting up that expectation for your with your client is gets kind of like, you know, difficult, right? It gets kind of hard to manage, hard to match sometimes, especially when they're like in a hurry and you kind of, I guess, you know what they want, but you don't realize what that need is. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes they'll say it so simply. Yeah, we just need, you know, it's like this, right? You just need a couple different things there. Cool. And they'll say it like it's the easiest thing. And then when you actually do it, you're like, dude, that's like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks worth of work. And they're expecting me to have it by fucking tomorrow. You know what I mean? That's where it gets kind of weird. So I mean, there is a bit of like, you know, I don't want to say under promise because that's kind of weird. Not weird in like a weird sense, but just like you don't really want to do that. You don't really want to underpromise. You just want to have the agreed. You want to set the amount and hit it, and know that you can hit it, right? And understand why you're trying to hit that amount, right? Because I could give you 100 thumbnails, right? If you asked me, but I'm not gonna, because that's a nightmare to do. You know what I mean? That's art school all over again. And how many people were fucking dying in art school whenever they had to do those kinds of assignments. You know what I mean? And like, yeah, it's good when you're, I won't say good, but it's a learning experience when you're a student. But when you have a family, you have a social life, when you have mental health and taxes to worry about, you don't really want to do that kind of shit. You know what I mean? It's just not a fun time. Every once in a while it happens, and it's like the worst ever. You like, worst case or best case scenario, you're mentally drained, and so picking up your next client becomes like a nightmare, because you're like, I don't want to work, but I need money coming in. And like, worst case scenario, you just killed a client, right? Not a client, but you killed the relationship with the client, and that's not good either. So it'd be like that. Right, I'm still dying. Aren't we all? Aren't we all? Speaking of dying, this industry be not doing so great, not doing so hot. That's okay though. We'll figure it out with these live streams, right? That's why we're here, man. We I wanted to talk about my process as a whole too. I think like something that one thing I am very, I don't want to say confident about, but something that I know that I can rely on oftentimes is like the process that was kind of built. I think for me, one of the better things that I guess had the fortunate situations to learn was that, like, whenever you were working, I started at an outsourcing studio, so a lot of the stuff that we did was like completely random, right? It was like we're doing like some like photoreal Call of Duty stuff, right? Which is fun, right? It's like there's a process, and then like literally fucking like the next day, or even like a half day from there, you know what I mean? It was just like a completely different assignment, you know what I mean? So like, for example, let me grab this, hold up, let me find this fucking layer, there it is. Boom, there you go. So like, we'd be working on like Call of Duty or something, right? It'd be like, yeah, we need this design, we need this whatever, photo reel, photo bashing, great, go on, fly, kid, and then we do the thing, and then like we would then the next day shift, like, okay, cool, we just got another client, we just got Hearthstone, we're doing an illustration for them. It's like, it's like jarring, because you're having to be like super photo-y, you're doing matte painting techniques, you're doing all sorts of stuff. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, illustration, brushstrokes, chunkiness, right? Big cracks, whatever it is, right? And it's the process that I work with today, and then I kind of show in a lot of my streams, right? It comes from like that, right? And I think like something that I guess I find that doesn't happen a lot, especially even with earlier professionals. It's like, if you don't allow them to have the tools that they kind of need, you know what I mean? Like if you take away, like, let's say 3D modeling, for example, right? If they're like, hey, we already have a modeler, so we just need an idea real quick. Like, I can't do this, you know what I mean? Like, there's like this level of like, there's a inflexibility with a lot of these like kind of newer skills. And for everybody, like, as you're developing, as you're growing as an artist, right, what I would highly recommend is find a process for yourself that is flexible and really establish like what that means, right? Because I think for me, whenever I first started, it was a lot of like, I guess like technically I was flexible, right? There was this ability to, I guess design and do things fine, but I couldn't like flip on a dime, right? Like I couldn't just change things midway. And like it made me reevaluate my process so many different times. Like every time I paint, I would like for example with photo bashing, I used to approach it very differently than I do now, right? And then for painterly things, I would approach that very differently. And like whenever I was working, I was either in one mode or the other, right? And then if I got an assignment, and especially since I was lead at the studio, I was bouncing between projects oftentimes, just kind of helping out the various teams, and like I would have to bounce from like illustration project to photo bashing and then kind of be on point each time. And it was really hard to like do that with the processes that I was developing, right? Where I learned photo bashing from one specific kind of mindset, right? From those teachers that I had. And then I learned illustration techniques, like more painterly kind of stylized things from like the stuff that I was doing with like those other teachers that, or whoever, right? Whatever learning source I had at the time. And it was so difficult to like switch gears like that so often. And something that I find it kind of becomes like one of the, I guess, more strong suits about, I guess, me nowadays is just that ability to just shift, right? And having a process that allows me to do that. Because before, I would be doing certain things and I'd have to like flatten down, cut out, and then kind of continue. And it was a very like very stuttery feeling kind of process. You're doing things and then you're like having to like kind of backtrack to fix some things. And that's why like nowadays you see when I'm doing things, it's like everything kind of leads in and then there's like a step in the beginning that feeds itself towards the end. There's all these different things. And when I'm doing the process and you're showing it, it can feel like a waste of time, right? I feel it in like some of the conversations I have with some students, even during like some of the Livestream plus stuff, the feedback sessions, like, oh, why are you doing it this way? Or it's like, oh, I do things this way, and I'll kind of watch them do it. I'm like, you could, right? And it works. And like I was saying, it works because you don't have a client. It works because you're not working with a studio, right? But it's gonna shift really quickly, and that's why I'm so insistent on like doing things in a way that's like flexible at the very least, because right now, you want to run into that problem while you're kind of, I don't say unemployed or anything, but like, if you're in a low commitment scenario, right? I can't fire you, so it's like good, but you don't want to find out how like detrimental one of your processes are because during a thing, because when you're getting paid, it's different, dude. When there's money on the line, it's just like it's a whole different game, man. There's no friends when there's like hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line. It's just like, can you get it done? And it gets very tense in studio settings like that. Someone in the chat says, "Yeah, how does studio workers make that fast of a art style jump?" Yeah, I think that's like that art style jump is huge, right? And it took a long time, and I'm not like perfect at it or anything. I stay afloat is basically how I put it. But like, whenever I'm working in things, like it's that ability to jump from like one look to another is fucking huge, man. Like it is so important. Just being able to like, I guess, understand how like things work, right? How you can go from doing like one style to another, right? Because like you know, the same studio might have a bunch of different projects under them, right? You know, like there's so many, like Netflix has like 50 different projects under them, right? And let's say you were hired on for one project, and you know that was like the project that is, you know, in line with you, right? That's perfect. That's great. You know, that's awesome. I'm glad you found that. But the next one probably isn't gonna be, right. At the very least, there's gonna be a slight change, if not a huge change. And you know, if you want to kind of stay, you know, relevant, stay around, right, it becomes like amazingly important just to be able to be like, cool, yeah, I can do that. You know, just you can flip styles, right? If I need something cartoony, great. If I need something photoreal, great. And understand how that works. And for me, I had to reevaluate the way I was working, because the way I was working wasn't conducive to like certain ways of like doing things, right? The process kind of dictated the photoreal aspect. For example, like when I was photo bashing, the way I created shapes and the way I was doing things didn't allow me to easily translate that speed into my more illustrative type things, more like stylized things, right? And so when I would be painting for something photoreal, I was better at that. Like my skill was growing faster than my skill in something a little more stylized, something a little more, you know, like cartoony or whatever, right? And so when I was told to do something stylized, it was like senior level artist versus like a junior level artist from the same person. You know what I mean? And it was just because my process wasn't really like locked down like that. And it was bad because, you know, there's your reliability kind of goes down. You know what I mean? Like your ability to kind of carry just doesn't it doesn't really like invoke confidence. You know what I mean? I think something more important than any skill in a in a production setting, right? If you want to be the like rock star artist, right, do it. You know, for those, you know, like that's something that everyone, you know, like you want to be that legendary artist, like you try, you know, absolutely, right? But the most useful artist doesn't have to be the rock star artist. They have to be the reliable one, right? Oftentimes those go hand in hand. If you're that good of an artist, you're probably reliable as well. Not always. I will, you know, let's make that clear. But understanding that whenever you're working, right, the people, the most the artists that do the best aren't always the best artists. You know what I mean? They're the ones that are the most consistent, and they kind of like listen, and they're a little more in tune with what the project needs, and they understand like the kind of like problems that that assignments will kind of run into without like an art director or whoever like having to kind of bail you out. You know what I'm saying? You're able to carry something on your own and understand how to do it effectively, right? Versus somebody that can just paint and draw really well, right? It's not that they're mutually exclusive, right? It could be the same artist that does both of those things, but understanding that like when we are looking to be one of the better artists at the studio, right? Understand that it doesn't mean that you need to be the best painter, the best illustrator at a place. You know, usually, and to be honest, it usually doesn't mean that. It just means that, you know, your ability to kind of stay on task and your consistency and your speed is very valuable to the production, right? I think it took a long time for me to kind of understand that. You know, it took a while for me to kind of realize like how important just consistency is. You don't have to be amazing. You have to be good. You have to be good. Don't get me wrong. You have to kind of perform at a certain level, but being consistent, right? Knowing that like, you know, they're kind of getting what they paid for, right? Like when a client hires you, it's so important that they feel that their money isn't wasted. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many times where, you know, I've worked with artists and stuff where they're like amazing artists. You're like, dude, this person's incredible. And then, you know, you work with them and then you're like, wait, what happened to all this other stuff? You know what I mean? Like you see the personal work that they do and it's like beautiful, like amazing, stunning work. And then you see the professional work and you're like, what? how's this possible? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel like the same person. You know what I mean? And that's like, it's very off-putting, and it really kind of like puts a sour taste in your mouth whenever you're like working with an artist like that. You know, just being consistent, being able to like replicate your process. You know, making sure that every time you put you put something on the page, you know how to fix it and make it look good. You know, and having an understanding of how this process works. There's you know, you never want to like accidentally come up with a design that works, right? There's times where whenever I'm working, you know, I'm told to like, hey, you know, we need to kind of design the look of a certain thing, right? There's always like like a style. Like oftentimes I'm put into like that kind of scenarios, I guess because of my skill set. But like I'd be working with a client or whoever. They're like, hey, we're trying to develop the look for this place or whatever, right? And like, you know, it's easy to accidentally come up with a design, right? Where it's like, wow, that looks really sick. That looks cool. Let's go with that. And then they're like, yeah, can you do like another one? You know what I mean? Like, can you show us what this other place looks like, you know? And, you know, they're like, you know, you create the second one. They're like, oh, that doesn't look like the first one at all, right? And it's usually because you're kind of like tripping into a design essentially, you know, and you never really want that to be the case. Boom. Let's see. Cool. Fredo says, why do you think that difference in professional work and personal work happens? Yeah, I mean, it could be a couple things, right? I think with like personal work, there's always like an inspiration behind it, you know? There's, especially if you're a certain kind of artist where, you know, you draw what you like, you know, you do the things that you like to do, and then, you know, you have the thing, right? So like, you know, when you're painting your own things, you're inspired, you're like having fun with it, right? But then when it comes to client work, you're kind of like whatever about it. You know what I mean? And it can be kind of difficult, and especially because different clients at different levels, right? There could be work that I did for like a really good art director, right? Where, you know, it like usually, to be honest, most of the paintings that we do in a professional setting, like your art director is like fucking carrying it, you know, that / production designer if you're in animation, but your leads really kind of drive a lot of that look. And especially for like kind of entry level to mid-level artists, that can make or break an image, right? Because whenever when you're completely on your own, that level is, you know, you're having to think through all the ideas, you're having to do all these things because, you know, it's your painting. But when you're in a production, you have that extra like that extra person, that extra eye on your work, and they're able to kind of drive home a lot of these ideas a little bit better than you are. So they'll just kind of guide you a little bit nicer. But then you have, like, let's say a bad art director, somebody that really doesn't know what they're doing. It can be very, I don't know, jarring to kind of see that the artist's work, because, you know, one good art director is like amazing painting, and then one bad art director, same artist, and then it's just like this kind of generic painting, right? Just because that's what they were given. And so like whenever you're kind of working your own stuff, you know, sometimes people like, well, they kind of do all that naturally, where, you know, they're told like, hey, you know, they bring in all this inspiration, they bring in all these cool things, and then when it comes to working with a client, the client maybe didn't provide them enough information, or, you know, didn't prep them or whatever on these things, and it can kind of, you know, it can have your artist can kind of lose steam because of that. You know what I mean? And it's just like the work ends up being like very generic and it's like not inspiring. But then you see their personal work, it's like, wow, it looks so inspired. Yeah, because that's what they wanted to do, versus like the bullshit that you wanted them to do. You know, not you, but the client, right? So that's the idea. I don't know. I don't really know. I don't like truly know. I'm just guessing. But that would be the idea. Ian says, apologies if you already answered how to address this, but what was the shutter button shape language for the vehicle hubcaps? Oh, was this But was the shutter button shape language used for the vehicle HUD? Because it wasn't. These were shapes. Those I made those from the side vehicle profiles. Here, I'll even show you where I grabbed it from. Boom. It was from when I created this wheel. I kind of liked that shape, and I was just, and a lot of it, what I was doing in this kind of earlier phase, right? Like these trucks look dumb. Let's be real here. Like it's okay. I mean, it's not that good. So like maybe one might be fine, but other than that, it's just like it's not that great. But that's not the point. The point is, I'm looking for like form languages. When I'm doing exercises like this, especially in the beginning, I'm looking for like just shapes that kind of give me inspiration. And like I really liked the way this turned out. I kind of like that kind of round, flared out wheel well with like, the kind of, I guess, splitter kind of connecting to it almost. Like, in a very abstract way. But I just took that shape and I kind of pulled it and like put it into here. And something that I will say that I don't really like doing, right? Because I know where you're coming from on this. Whenever I'm pulling from references, right? And I have I'll pull up my reference board right now. Where are you at? Week. Here's that. All right. So I had this camera, right? The shutter button idea, right? That's where he's coming from this. I had the camera idea. And I'm kind of like pulling shapes from it and pulling things. But what I don't like to do is I don't like to grab the physical shape and implement it, right? I don't really like do it. For one, I want the average shape, right? Where it's like you look at it, you're like, there's some hexagonal shapes and then there's some rounds, a lot of bevels and stuff like that. That's kind of where I was going with it. So I'm kind of pulling those shapes from a thing because when you just start pulling like, oh, I like this shape and you just immediately implement it, it can be kind of weak sometimes. So whenever I do that, I really try not to show that, right? Because the whole point, the idea behind this was like, oh yeah, the idea of an attachment to the bottom of the grip of the camera, right? And so, what if there's like a base camera and there's like this kind of winder grip that's attaches to it, so it's a detachable kind of piece, right? And then that's what kind of spawned that bottom half of the truck. The reason why that bottom half of the truck looks different, right? Like it's a blacker color versus like the red, right? Not only is it inspired by the K truck that we saw earlier, but also the fact that it looks like it could detach. You could separate this truck from that bottom section and, it'd just be a normal truck again. That's the kind of ideas we're playing with. It's the function and the aspects of it that make it versus like showing physical shapes that are exactly the same, right? When you're implementing your form languages, I really try not to like include the exact thing like, oh yeah, I really like, this kind of like wedge shape right there. And I try not to do that because you take the idea of this flat, utilitarian paneling, these kind of like cargo hooks right here, right? I take those ideas and implement the idea of it. It needs to be a hook. It doesn't need to be that hook, right? It needs to be siding or plating or, a more utilitarian kind of aspect, but it doesn't have to be the exact same thing, right? Because it's not, right? Because that's how you get form languages that kind of clash. So in my very limited experience, right? It's harder to kind of pull it apart. What I like to think about is, for everybody, right? For the science experiments that you did in school, whenever they do the solutions versus mixture class, right? Like like salt water versus like a fruit salad. That's what we did. Like it was like a fruit salad bowl, and she's like, they put oranges, they put pears and pineapples, right? And then like, this is a mixture because you can just pick out the various pieces, right? And then my teacher is she, mixed salt water, right? It was like water, salt mixed together. You can't exactly pull out the salt without doing something to it, right? And so they did that experiment, and the reason I'm bringing that up now is because you want your designs to be a solution, not a mixture. You don't ever want to look at something and be able to pull something out of it and fully identify like, hey, this is exactly from this. Like, for example, We know this is a tire. We know this is a rim. We know this is a headlight. We know this is a canopy for a truck or whatever it is, right? But it's not an existing one. It's not a piece directly pulled from something, because if you pull directly from something like that, it can kind of look jarring, because then you got to make the rest up. Then you have to either match that, or the pieces don't really fit together that well, or whatever it is, right? So that's the idea. You want your designs to be a solution, not a mixture, right? So very throwbacky second grade, third grade science class. But that's the idea, right? Cool. Yeah, great questions. Nice. Have a safe flight, David. You're already gone, but you know, you'll catch this later, hopefully. Any other questions? We got like 30 minutes left. I'm still going on this. I am talking a lot this week though. But to be fair, I did take this kind of far, so it's not that I'm like wasting time here, but I'm like, there is a lot less to do.
Hey Kenny, I have a question.
What's up, dude?
So if you have an assignment like to design a house, for example, do you plan out the interior beforehand, or you just find a cool shape and then figure out the interior later on?
Yeah. So the audio was kind of quiet. So for those that didn't hear that, the question is, whenever you have like when you need to design like a building or something, right? Like, do you design the interior as you're designing the exterior, or do you just kind of do the exterior first, right? Basically, it's like how deep do you look into it before you wait, hold it. Before you I guess start designing, right? And so for me, this is me personally with my experience, right? Where like what I've, I guess, kind of done in my jobs and stuff like that. I don't like to think that far. Sometimes it's important, right? Sometimes it is. It is something where it really depends on who you're working with, or what they need and various things like that, right? But understand that they don't always need the interior, right? And you can usually make the interior work. Like for example, like this car, I didn't really design the interior cockpit, because we're gonna see, like in an ideal world, right? We're gonna see this vehicle kind of like in like like in its surroundings, but in an exterior way first. And so what I need this design to actually work before I do any of that other stuff. Does that make sense? Like, I don't want to design the interior if the exterior hasn't even been approved yet. You know what I'm saying? So that's part of the reason why I design the way I do. It's because where's the rasterized text? There it is. Because you don't always need every single thing first. You need to do what's important first. For example, there's times where I design the interior first before the exterior, right? And the reason we do that is because I needed, we're going to be inside the building mostly. So the interior needs to make more sense. The outside, it's like, you might get like a shot or something. But overall, it's probably fine if you just leave that alone. You know what I'm saying? It's not really that crazy to kind of just make an exterior and then have some of the stuff kind of match up. You know what I mean? So that's what you want to think about. When are we going to see this? How important is it that we see any of this? You know what I mean? Once you get that, everything kind of becomes a lot easier to understand. So just design what's important, right? There's a term in animation. I'm sure other places do this too, but there's an idea called out of picture, right? Oops, it's called OOPS, out of picture. And so like whenever you're designing something, right, if you're out of picture, which basically means it's never going to show up in the movie or in the show or whatever, you're wasting your time, because there's I mean, you're just burning money at that point. There's no reason to design it. We'll never see it, you know? And so when you're designing, you want to make sure that you're kind of staying within the scope of what's necessary. Because, you know, it's like a Photoshop file, right? Like, we never design outside of what we see, like the window, right? Like, for example, like this banner back here that says K-Truck, right? It doesn't go past this frame because you're never going to see what's on the other side of that, right? I don't need the bleed. I don't need the extra bleed for that to work. And so whenever I'm designing things for, you know, shows or whatever, it's the same thing. If you never see it, you don't ever need to design it. So if it's important, I will design it. For example, like sometimes you'll have a vehicle and the vehicle is like, oh, you know, there's a 5-person seater, right? Like, let's say like the Guardians of the Galaxy ship where there's already like a level of like, there's a crew there, there's, you know, there's function that needs to accommodate those amounts of people. It might be important to at least understand how many people are using it, because, you know, you could do like let's say like a jet, for example, right? Like a jet is a 2-seater versus like, you know, something else, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, that's kind of where it becomes important. But usually, generally speaking, you just pick one, whatever's most important, and you start there, and then you build the rest after that. Because it all comes later, you know. Because you'll probably, that's where like the extra designs and the extra call outs and stuff need to kind of happen. You know what I mean?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, for sure, dude. Yeah, great questions. I think, you know, it's things like that where you really want to know. I think as a professional, like one of the bigger things is just understanding why. You know, like for everybody, right? If you want the secret to higher approval rates from your leads, you know what I mean? Like the secret to like getting your client or your lead to just, you know, approve your designs more. If you're ever running into the problems of, you know, hey, I'm not really getting approved as often as I like. My art director or whoever is like always shooting down my ideas, right? That happens, you know, happens a lot. You know, what you want to ask yourself is, why am I designing this thing? Why does this thing exist? You know what I mean? Not just the fact that like, oh, it's a truck that holds stuff. You know what I mean? Don't think about that. It's not the function of the vehicle. It's what does the vehicle do in the grand scheme of the entire project, right? Because whenever I'm designing, let's say a hero weapon, right? Like the weapon that the main character uses, right? Where it's like the fucking thing, man. It's Luke's lightsaber, or I guess Anakin's lightsaber. But, you know, it's the lightsaber, right? The thing, it shows up in every movie, right? Yeah, you're gonna spend a ridiculous amount of time on that, right? You just know that. Just understand that's how that works, right? You're gonna you're gonna be on that thing for months, fucking maybe years. You know what I mean? Like, it's a long time. Or if you're designing a variation of, you know, a stormtrooper's like blaster, right? It's not even like the main stormtrooper. It's some side stormtrooper that they need for a certain thing, and they see him for 2 seconds. Yeah, you can probably get that in the first try. You know what I mean? Like you pump out anything. Like, I don't want to say anything, but as long as it has a fucking trigger and a barrel, it's probably going to get approved, right? Because they don't really care. They're not going to see it that often. So they're not going to spend that much time really worrying about it. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, understand why it exists, right? Because if it's a main thing, right? You know, really understand what it's there to do. Understand like, okay, so it's going to be, you know, the reason this truck exists because we need to kind of use it. The main character's going to get in, he's going to load up his bike, and then they're going to like drive over to, you know, the event or whatever it is, right? Cool. So there needs to be a way to load the bike in the car, right? There needs to be something, you know, all the other stuff, all the patterns and stuff, and like, who cares? But it's that function that they usually need, because like directors and stuff, in my experience, it's not that they don't care. It's that they're looking for a specific function. They're looking for, like, they need, like, there's something that happens with that design where it's like they need the thing to do something in particular, right? They're like, oh yeah, so the doors need to open like this because the character like walks out of it and the camera's gonna be on this side, and there's this whole like event that happens around that thing. You know what I mean? And so when they think about it, they're looking for that function. All you really have to do is understand what that function is, because now, if I were to change the form language, the way the paneling is on this car, right? Yeah, there's some paneling designs that will look better, but more often than not, people don't give a shit. They don't care, right? Because if this panel design, went like, I don't know, let's not do red. The whole truck's red. So like, this panel line kind of goes like this and then like kind of over, right? If I did a panel line that kind of like cut diagonally this way and then like kind of like the what is it, the Kia Ionic, right? Whatever it is, it looks like kind of like folded paper, right? If I did something like kind of weird or whatever, right? But there was still a door there. This function was still there. All of this made sense, right? Generally speaking, they won't care. Generally, like most of the time, there will be little instances if it gets in the way, right? If your design like is obtrusive to the main idea, that's bad, right? But most of the time, the small things like that, they don't care. No one really bothers about all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? Long explanation, but that's the idea. For these kind of like smaller, minor things don't matter as much as you think. Boom. Let's go. How? Dude, this is working out. I'm actually kind of excited how this truck's turning out. Like, there's a lot of painting I still need to do. There's like, weathering effects and various stuff like that. But like, I think like it's fun looking back at where it came from. You're like, dude, that model's terrible. And then seeing like some of the design. Like, I think the bottom left or that middle bottom one was like one of the first designs, right? And it's like, dude, that's terrible. But like, it's kind of working out. I've probably spent a little extra time on this just to kind of make it a little bit nicer, right? But like, overall, right, the design is like, really trust the process. I think that's something that there's this belief whenever you're designing, and this happens a lot. Like some of the mentorships that I'll do, there's this belief that when you're designing, you need to have like 100% of the idea figured out, right then and there. You know what I'm saying? Like in your thumbnail process, if it doesn't look exactly like this, then you're fucking up. You know what I mean? And that's not the case, right? Just understand that when you're designing, it's a growth process, right? I'm taking care of the bigger ideas in those earlier phases, and then I'm working down into these smaller ideas, right? I'm still designing things. There's obviously big changes that I'm not going to make, like changing panel lines and changing like the designs of some of the major forms. But like a lot of these smaller details, right? I didn't really worry about that. I'm compartmentalizing every single step because it's not really important that I figure that out in the beginning, because there's already so much to do, right? When you have literally like a reference board, it's like there's a billion different ideas that you could come up with. And then you're just trying to put something on the page and say, I kind of like this. Like I was like, I kind of like that wheel there. Let's kind of go with that idea. I kind of like the way this truck's going. Let's kind of go with that idea. And then from there, right, making my model, getting something that hopefully, has some other things to it that are kind of cool. In a normal setting, I might take this model a little bit further. In this case, I'm just showing you how little modeling you can actually get away with. And then from there, it's just like, just paint, make shit happen, man. Make it fun, make it interesting. Do something that excites you. Let's see. Cool. Boom, boom, boom. trying to like figure out like some patterning or something on this, just to kind of like just give it some entry. Right now it's just like this kind of black, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I like that. But if I like followed that, how's that look? We got about 20 minutes left, guys. Any questions? What's up, Nikhil? Showed up late. How dare you?
Hey Kenny, how are you?
What's up, bro? Glad to see you, man. Glad to hear you.
Okay.
How's life?
It's going great.
Nice. Let's see. Like whenever I'm designing these things, I'm just making shapes. There's things like like I was saying, like there's things where I don't really like put too much thought into it in the beginning. I don't know. Maybe that's why I'm a mediocre artist. But like, whenever I'm designing, I try to really compartmentalize what I'm doing. Right. I don't really need to worry about all these like small cut lines, all these weird design things, because it's like, who cares? You know, if this was there, great. If it's not, I don't think anybody would miss it. You know what I mean? And so like things like this, where it's just like, I don't know, whatever. This is where you can have fun. This is where you as the artist kind of come in and just make things happen, you know? Like that's kind of fun. I don't know. But it's like, I think really understanding when and where to show or when and where to focus on this, right? It's not important in the earlier steps, but as you get better, as you're kind of like, you know, able to kind of manage more, right? You can kind of break down the steps a little bit less. And for everybody, right, as you're watching this, I have a really big emphasis on like, you know, just doing things in bite-sized pieces, right? Because there's already so much to do. It's already so damn hard to like do any of this. You know what I mean? But whenever you're, you know, I guess starting, just understand where that line is, right? Understand where that, you know, where you can kind of take it easy a little more, or at least free up some bandwidth, right? Because you're like, you know, when you're first starting, you know, you're like basically out of RAM, right? Like you just your brain can't like handle all that information all at once because you're so worried about like, I don't know, maybe not you, but you know, like for me, I was so worried about just perspective as a whole. You know what I mean? Like, how do I even fucking draw anything? Not to mention, create interesting designs, right? And then my whole mind was kind of focused on those ideas, and then, you know, your designs kind of suffer because of it. You know what I mean? And learning how to compartmentalize and just trust that, like, I know how to paint, I know how to draw, I know how to render things. You know, just rely on that process, you know, because if you can do that, oh, you're gonna be unstoppable, you know. But it's that lack of trust, maybe in yourself, maybe in others, who knows, that can really like kind of take over. You know what I mean? Like it can be so like, I need to show that I know how to draw. I need to show that, you know, I know how to paint something. Because I'll show my leads or my art directors or whoever, like, the shittiest drawing you've ever seen. You're like, this guy gets paid to do this? That's crazy, you know? And like, yeah, that's really what it is, man. It's just trash. But then when you actually like, if you see some of the paintings that I've done, and you see the thumbnail it took to get there, like, I mean, I do it during the live streams all the time. But like when you see it, it's just like, how did that get to this? You know what I mean? It's not even like the last is that amazing. It's just that's how bad the first thing is, you know? But like, just trust that process, you know? You know how to fix things. You know how to paint rocks, you know? So don't worry about it. But focus on what's important. So many times I'll I'll see people like doing this kind of initial phase and focusing on the wrong things, you know? It's like, oh yeah, you know, I really try to figure out the cut lines on this thing before I move on. It's like, dude, we're not even like blocking out yet, and you're worried about like how the internals work. It's like, no, man, like figure out the forms and then apply those forms to, you know, an actual model that you're going to take further, and then start painting. And then you can start worrying about all those cut lines, you know, all worry about all the details. You know, this graphic on the side didn't even show up until like last night, 2 nights ago. You know, I was just painting. I was like, you know what? I want something kind of loud. You know, I wanted something kind of like just like not the shape aggressive, the tone of it is just aggressive. You know what I mean? It's just like a loud imagery on the side of this car. Whether it's cool or not, who knows? Who knows, right? But the whole point is, you're doing something that you know, you're allowed to think as you move forward. You know, you're allowed to like design things and have a little more freedom that way. You know what I'm saying? So let's have some more scratches on this thing. This spot's up here like really empty and gross. Boom. There it is. They have like cat hair on me. My face is like itchy, dude. Cool. So this truck is like, it's almost done. I have a little bit left to do. Like I'm gonna like probably flatten this down almost completely, like wheels and all. Eventually, once I kind of get all these effect passes in, right? Just get all these scratches, these kind of marks. And I'll kind of show you kind of where I get to next week before we start the study. So just to kind of reiterate, right? Next week we're gonna be picking up a new topic, right? So vehicle design basically done, right? We'll cover like where I got to next week, right? Just to kind of show like, you know, that whole process again next week. But we're gonna be doing effective studying, right? So for those of you that, you know, you're having trouble kind of like figuring out like, you know, how to effectively study, how to improve your skill sets, right? Because that's a big thing too. It's, you know, we do studies because we're looking to improve skills, but if you don't know how to study, that growth can be severely limited. You know, it can feel like you're not really doing anything just because you're not applying things effectively, right? So there is gonna be a, you know, an illustration that we kind of do, right? So just for everybody that's looking to do portfolio pieces, just understand like there will be a painting coming out of this. We're gonna start with a study to kind of get us in the right kind of spot, right? Right understanding about a topic, and then we'll go from there. So I'll challenge myself a little bit this time, just to get out of my comfort zone a little bit. I don't quite know what that's going to be yet, but we'll find out. You know, we'll do something. To be honest, I'm probably just going to look at my portfolio and be like, what am I missing? Because, you know, for everybody, right, this is basically what that is. This is this whole entire stream is really me just being like, hey, you know, I wish I had this painting and, you know, finished a little bit better. I wish I had this thing in my portfolio or whatever, right? And slowly but surely, right, we're slowly getting to a point to where the portfolio is starting to look, you know, better and better, right? And for everybody, like, you know, if you're not following along and you're looking for more work, right, you're trying to create portfolio stuff, taking classes, you know, just follow along, right? It's free to follow along. It's cheap to get feedback. And I mean, I would highly recommend it. There's some really cool things happening in the Livestream Plus Discord, and don't sign up just for like that, but just, you know, like everybody needs to kind of be doing some portfolio stuff, so you might as well do it with friends, right? Unless I'm not your friend, in that case. Cool. Let's get some mud, baby. Let's see. And it's fun, like it just feels like you're just painting on these effects. Like you have your dirt brush and you're actually applying it, It's very super simple how like it's crazy how easy a lot of this stuff is. As long as you set up your files to kind of work that way, it usually works out pretty well, Super easy process. But hopefully, right, this makes sense. Hopefully for everybody kind of following along, watching, or just being here in general, right? Seeing how we can go from these shitty side sketches, right, to hopefully something that you can kind of be proud of, right? And obviously I'm going to take this further and hopefully be more proud of it, but for now it's like we're getting to a pretty good point. So any last questions before we dip out? There's a couple of you guys here in the live stream. Just curious. Oh, there's some more questions in here. Oh, sorry, I missed the live stream chat. I was looking at the live stream chat channel, not the live stream chat inside the thing. Paulo says, do you work with freelancers? Any challenges when directing others? Challenges? Yes. I think one of the harder things I've found when it comes to like giving art direction, right? I think like when you're your own boss, when you're the artist, right? You know how you're gonna do it, because you know your process. If you're somebody that's like starting to give art direction in any capacity, generally speaking, right, you're kind of like you probably know how to do your job decently well. You know what I mean? Like generally speaking, in a professional setting at the very least, right? And so whenever I'm like tasked to ever like give anybody feedback or lead anybody in any particular way, right, it can be very difficult sometimes. And I've seen in like my experience art directing has even like I feel hopefully made me a better artist because of it, right? Because like you have to word things and set someone else up, right? It's like you have to mentally do the painting because you're the one that's kind of guiding this trajectory, right? Like if you're art directing, right, you're directing the art, right? Directing it. And so, you're having to tell somebody how to do your painting, essentially. You know what I mean? Like it's their painting, right? But you're the one that thought of it. You're the one that has the idea. You're the one that has the task. And so like I found that whenever I'm giving someone feedback, right, I have to understand where they're coming from, right? I have to understand what they're trying to do, because they can't just be an extension of me, because that's not how it works. Unless I'm working with me, right? Nobody thinks like you, or not a lot of people think like you, right? It's, you're a particular individual. And so when you give feedback like that, it can be very difficult, right? You ever like interact with those difficult art directors with like, screw it, I'll just take it and do it, right? And it's like, yeah, they could, but a good art director, in my opinion, understands that their job, they're not in charge of the painting anymore. They're in charge of the environment that the painters are painting in, not the physical painting environment, the space, the the workplace, the hours, the work hours, that you're in charge of that kind of thing, right? Where you're setting them up for success, right? You either give them like, really good feedback, you give them solid paint overs, you give them a really good reference board, you really kind of break things down for them, or give them freedom, right? It's like you're trying to find that balance of like, this person is an individual artist that is able to contribute at a certain level, right? So you want to give them enough freedom to like actually do things, because you can strangle your artists as well. And I've seen that happen with some studios I've worked at, where the art director is so unbearably hard to work with that even the best artists are just strangled, because any idea they bring it gets shot down. Like, that's not what I was thinking. It's like, yeah, man, but that's not a collaboration at the end of the day, right? That's, you know, when you're working with an art director like that, it's a fucking nightmare, because you're like, dude, then you do it. You know what I mean? Like, why give me all these roundabout ass notes? Just fucking do it. Just do the painting, man, you know? But that's, you know, the whole idea is they don't have the time to do it because they're in meetings and doing other stuff, right? And so it trying to give someone feedback is this weird balance of like setting them up for success, right? Giving them everything they need, but giving just enough room to, like, you know, just enough room to contribute, because if they're not contributing, they're not thinking anymore. And it's just like, you know, then you get the dumb issues of like, you know, hey, how does this thing work? I don't know, I didn't think of it. You know what I mean? Where it's like, why didn't you think of it? It's just because it's like, because you're not allowing me to think, man. You know, you're not giving me the freedom and the ability to actually be a concept artist here. I am just a rendering hand, right? And, you know, depending on who you're working with, if you're working with like a junior artist, generally speaking, right, you kind of have to do that, because they're missing some skills to kind of like, I guess, do something with that, with like a lot of leeway, right? Like a lot of freedom. They're kind of missing some of those skills, right? So you need to guide them a little bit better. With a senior level artist, right? If you guide them too much, you can kind of restrict their movement, and you want their movement, because generally speaking, they're probably better than you are, right? And that's the weird part, right? It's when you're art directing somebody that's better than you. It's like, what do you do then? You know what I mean? It's like, imagine, right? Somebody that you looked up to, and you're now giving them art direction. The fuck do you do about that? You know what I mean? And it's like, because in a school setting, or in a, you know, it's always like the better artist is, you know, the better artist, right? You don't give feedback to the artist that's better than you, right? In a school setting, because they're better, whatever it is, right? That's the mentality, right? But when you're in a studio setting, right, it's just feedback's feedback, right? It doesn't really matter. Hopefully everybody understands that. It's, you know, we're kind of, you know, we're in a collaborative setting. Egos go out the door. Like, we're not doing that shit here. You know, it doesn't matter how many years of experience you have. If you have good feedback, you give good feedback, right? Don't randomly give feedback. For those of you listening, don't give feedback if you're not some sort of lead. But when you are, right, you're looking for, you know, that you're looking for that ability to, like, just give them, it's a process, and you have to work with them, you know. And I always think back to some of my better art directors. I'm like, what did they do, right? They gave me my freedom to kind of explore, but they gave me direct, you know, actions to kind of hit. And for me, the biggest thing is like telling your artists why you need them to do this thing. You know what I mean? Because let's say, for example, like, hey, I need a vehicle. Cool. And they come back with like a sports car. You're like, dude, I'm supposed to put a bike in the back. You're like, you didn't fucking tell me that. You know what I mean? It's like, there's a lot of those things, because you've been in that meeting as the art director, right, with the client or whoever, and everybody is on the same page. And there's like 10 different meetings, and everyone said it's a truck, everyone said this thing, and then all of a sudden you give your artist the task. You're like, oh yeah, you know what's going on. They haven't been in any of those meetings. And it can be kind of like, and it sounds funny that I'm saying it like this, but it's like that happens all the time, right? Your directors, you ever work with a client and they're like, oh yeah, we had this change. We changed this last week. Yeah, it's not a truck anymore. It's a bike or whatever, you know, whatever, right? I don't work there, man. I'm your contractor, bro. Like, I'm not in the meetings with you. They're like, oh yeah, that's right. You know, it's not like that. They're better than that. But that has happened, right? Where there's changes where, you know, you just didn't know because you're not there, you know? And like, so like, you know, my better art directors that I've had, it's always been like, you know, how does this thing work? What's necessary? What's part of this thing that they need to know? Because there's a function that needs to be hit. There's a purpose for this thing, right? There's an inspiration behind it. If you can kind of really relay that, it allows the artist to kind of run, right? Because if they don't know why this thing exists, they don't know what to do with this thing or what this thing needs to do in the grand scheme of the project, they can't be free with their thoughts, because any ideas they bring, they don't really know if it's going to work. But they feel like, hey, we need this thing to kind of be like, like a fun vehicle that, kind of shows up in the game, and you can kind of like, kind of drift around in it and have fun with it, right? And then like you give them that package and you tell them what it's going to be used for. Whatever they design is going to be within that package, and it kind of gives you more options, right? You're not trying to squeeze the creativity out of the artist. You're trying to allow them to have fun and play within the parameters of your sandbox, from my limited, very limited experience as any sort of lead. So just want to make that clear. I'm not a lawyer, so this is just me from like, for one, actually giving feedback, but two, like being an artist with a bunch of different director types and this and that. It's just like I've had some amazingly shitty art directors, like just some of the worst in the industry, and then I've had some of the best, right? And seeing that difference, you really want to understand that, because when an artist doesn't feel like they can contribute, right, when they don't feel like they have any freedom in the project, that's how you get the sterile bullshit. That's how you get the they're just like phoning it in, it's because it's not that they don't care, it's you're not giving them the ability to care, right? Because you're strangling them essentially, and you want to like really kind of just keep that in mind, right? Because the same artist, they can do so many things, but if you don't allow them that freedom, they never will, right? Dave says preach. Stop it, Dave. All right. Cool. So we are at a good stopping point. Not much of a demo today, right? It's the same techniques that we talked about last week, but a lot of like thought process, right? So just to kind of review what we did so far, right? From last week, we had the kind of base materials done, and we really spent our time kind of breaking that down. And from last week, you can kind of see how easy it is to create variations on your ideas. I didn't really create that many color pass variations. In a normal setting, I might. To be honest, I probably wouldn't. I'm not really known for creating that many ideas. For better or for worse, who really knows? Ask my leads and see how much they like it. But with this process, I was able to like change colors very quickly, add things, take things out, and really kind of work with it in a very free way, right? From the model being just a gray box. And for those of you like kind of like wondering maybe why I didn't apply that gray, apply the materials in this kind of gray box, is because once you do that, it forces you to kind of stay within that, because now it's really hard to color change things. I mean, it's not hard, but it does feel a little bit different each time. All the materials are going to be a little bit different. And so, I gray boxed the entire vehicle. I painted it as if it was all just a matte box, and then masked it out, add what I needed to add, color shifted it, did things I needed to do. I'm going to keep painting this to make it, feel better, more interesting, and just overall cooler. But the freedom to kind of allow myself to add colors as I need, add patterns as I need, do what I need to do, add scratches, materials, all that stuff, it comes from that process, right? And so for those of you following along, right, just understand that's why we're doing things this way. You can paint it flat, and probably looks a little more artistic in some instances, right? Where, whenever you're painting like let's say someone like John Fry, right? He might not paint things this way, but he's John Mother effing Fry, you know what I mean? So he does his thing, and that's why I'm not his level. But for those of you just trying to get a vehicle out, right, just to kind of get your foot in that door, try this process. It's very flexible. It's very easy to get something at the very least at a pretty good level, because most of the time, to be completely honest, you'll never actually need to get past this level, because a modeler can take it over from here. If you're painting something like this, where it looks, generally speaking, pretty 3D, more often than not, you're going to be handing it to a modeler anyway. So you don't really need to worry too much about getting that photoreal quality, right? So, you know, things to keep in mind. It's not perfect. It works pretty well, I will say. But yeah, things to think about. So next week, we're going to get into, well, I'm going to present this again just as a final product, show you everything I do to it. I'll add all the bells and whistles and I'll do all the fun stuff, right? But next week, effective studying, right? And it sounds kind of boring, right? It sounds like we're just going to do a study. What are you talking about? There's going to be an illustration that kind of accompanies it. But what we're going to do is use a study or a couple studies, whatever I decide, to kind of help us understand how to take our illustrations further, right? Especially when you're lacking the visual library of a certain topic, right? We're so often we're pushed into a topic or a thing that we've never really done before, right? Like, for example, I do a lot of Japanese things. Oh, if I was told to do like some Byzantine architecture, right? I don't have as much experience doing that. So generally speaking, probably need to do a study. Or like clouds, trees, water, right? All sorts of different things that you might not have experience with. And so we're going to do some studies that lead into an illustration. So if you'd like to join, right, we're starting next week. Join the Livestream Plus for some feedback. If you'd like to just follow along, right? But, you know, if you want feedback for this to potentially be a portfolio piece, right? The Livestream Plus is kind of where that happens, right? So if if you join the Discord, go to the shop, you can find the role there. And yeah, so we'll cover that next week. So with that in mind, guys, thanks so much for hanging out this past month. You know, this is I'm gonna continue this throughout this week, and hopefully it turns out looking halfway decent. You know what I mean? I think it's kind of already getting there, right? It has some character to it. It has a charm. With that in mind, guys, thanks for hanging out, and yeah, I'll see you next week. Later.